typical thing that I do see, and we're probably not the best company to help with at this stage, is where we do that kickoff call, and really, they're not looking for a security person to come and help build out AppSec, CloudSec, IR detection. They really just need a salesperson to help with kind of onboarding large customers, right? Enterprise customers. And so they need somebody that can help with sales enablement to market programs like SOC 2. Maybe it's a discipline in healthcare and it's HIPAA and high trust, or FedRAMP in the federal space. And actually, they don't really need a head of security. They need somebody that can work with the board to bring in sales.
Welcome to a new episode of All Aboard, the show where we have real conversations with IT and security practitioners. No fluff, no talking points, just straight talk from experts and advice for tackling the toughest problems facing cloud-forward companies today. I'm your host, Alex Bovee, CEO and co-founder of Conductor One. For this week's episode of the All Aboard podcast, I'm thrilled to be chatting with Tom Alcock. Tom is a co-founder and partner at Code Red Partners, a recruitment firm that specializes in security talent. They help companies bring on top-notch security professionals from engineers to senior-level leaders. With over 12 years of experience in technical recruiting and consulting, Tom delves into Code Red's genesis and hiring philosophies, how they plan to bridge the cybersecurity talent gap, and some common pitfalls when it comes to making your company's first security hire. Let's jump right in. Tom, thanks for joining me today. I really appreciate it, and looking forward to our chat. I know that you are a partner at Code Red Partners. Can you talk a little bit about Code Red Partners? What do you guys do? What kind of companies do you work for, and how do you partner with them?
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, Alex, thanks for having me on the All Aboard podcast. Big fan, and grateful to be here. I guess to kick it off, Code Red is a cybersecurity recruitment practice. We have three main tracks of business. So the first is helping household technology companies, late stage IPO, pre-IPO, and then post-IPO with anything from like senior engineering hiring right through to distinguished engineers, director, right up to VP, CISO level searches. The second track is probably how we got to know each other, which was helping security product companies seed to Series D, like Conductor One, helping with scaling engineering talent, more over on the software engineering side of the house, so front end, back end, full stack, and then following their journey through marketing, community, go-to-market. And then probably the thing I'm most involved in is helping startups, Series A to C, make their first security hire, which is a ton of fun and without challenge, and then building out the security roadmap and team from there.
That's amazing. I can imagine. I'm actually really looking forward to and excited to ask you about that first security hire, because I think there's like something really interesting there. But maybe before we jump into it, when we've talked over the last few months, something that really resonated that I felt like we connected on is you're also a founder. You're starting your own company. This is a business for you. You're on that journey. Can you talk a little bit about what was your founder sort of genesis story? How did you come to start Code Red Partners, and was it born out of necessity, opportunity, something else?
Yeah, really great question. So I've been in staffing and consulting now for about 14 years. I started my career in the UK about 2009, 2010 with a company called S3, where I cut my teeth on technical recruiting and staffing. And had a lot of fun, like learn how to do it, kind of grew from senior consultant to senior principal, started growing out teams across the UK. I did a lot of business over in Ireland. But I always had this deep entrepreneurial spirit through, early jobs, through trying to create side hustles on the fly whilst on this career path. Hit a bit of a hiatus in my career, probably 2017. And a good friend of mine, who is my co-founder, he and I had kept in touch. He'd just gone through a sale of another recruitment business, and we started kind of iterating and throwing the ideas of a potential startup together, which was at the time was a wild and crazy idea. I had a really nice cushy job and kind of a team that I really loved and all that kind of fun stuff. But as we went back and forth, we realized that we shared similar philosophy for recruiting, relationships, and then niche markets. And so in 2017, we started doing research. And basically, we were doing a lot of conversations with founders of businesses, CTOs, and talking to them about what is their challenge. And this was before we started the business. And the challenge is, or at least where we thought that the opportunity was 2017, you'll remember there was a big push for crypto and blockchain before the Christmas crash, the first crash. AI and machine learning, which is the most overused kind of term in any business right now, but a really exciting business. And maybe that was the start of we could have done as well. And the final one was cybersecurity. I think that in 2017, a lot of CTOs that we were talking to and the research we were doing was that cybersecurity was front of mind, and a lot of budget was being aligned to that. And so for a recruitment practice, we could really invest in growing a business out. And that's ultimately what we did. We kind of set up a business. I left my job, from the kind of mighty roots of Birmingham in the United Kingdom. I don't know if you've seen the Peaky Blinders, but that's a famous show from that town. And we started this business that we kind of is now we just celebrated our 5th year anniversary. We help huge technology companies and some really exciting smaller ones grow in their security program. So ultimately that was, kind of my genesis moment. And it's not been without challenge. We got to, in the last couple of years, we went through kind of COVID periods, which hiring stopped. In the kind of last year, Q4 and Q1, hiring is pretty cyclical. Starting to see the market pick back up a little bit now, which is quite exciting.
Yeah, that is really awesome. When you mentioned Birmingham, I confess, as a born and bred in the United States and living in the South for a very long time, I immediately always think of Alabama when anyone says Birmingham. So
I get that quip quite often as it works out when I talk about my roots from Birmingham, and they were like, Alabama, you just don't have the accent.
Like, I'm not seeing it. What I love about what you guys are doing and what your team and your company is focused on is it really is at this confluence of, well, first of all, like recruiting and hiring is really hard. It's really hard to get right. Recruiting security talent is really hard to get right, and there's a shortage of that. So your team is solving an exceptionally hard problem, and helping to partner with companies solving a really valuable problem. I can't remember the report that I looked at recently, but I think it might have been the Verizon report, but it really mentioned that security hiring was like a number one priority for most companies, and it's the hardest thing to do right now. So it seems like you're really well positioned to capitalize on that. I am very curious how you think about hiring and particularly around like maybe philosophies. One thing I've found in my career is that practice, as you do a lot of hiring, you just start to develop some pattern matching that, for better or worse, kind of starts to shape how you think about making hires and how you make bets on people. And you're in that position where you've probably based on managing a lot of candidates. And so I'm kind of curious if you developed any hiring philosophies yourself over the years.
Yeah. Well, to address what you first said, it is hard. Like, it's really hard for any hiring manager to make quality security hires. And as an agency, I suppose that's become our superpower. But like, it's still a challenge. There's huge companies. I mean, Google just swallowed talent. So we're always competing against other companies. Our biggest competitor as an agency is these really solid on-site recruitment agencies. In the UK, on-site recruitment companies, the on-site team aren't as talented, in my humble opinion, as they are out here. They're really impressive, and companies like Google and Amazon have security talent functions bigger than Code Red. So they do a great job fundamentally, but it is tough. To answer your question around the hiring philosophy, I probably have two that I try and kind of work through. And one is trying to hire not from, like, you jump on a hiring kind of kickoff call with pre or late kind of pre-IPO company or just IPO'd, and they want the best FANG talent, or MANG as we're calling it now. And everybody wants that, traditionally with a master's in computer science or maybe even a PhD. There's only a finite pool of that talent. And also, do you need that? Like, is that really, or are we not open-minded to see what else is out there? So first and foremost, it's about winning the hearts and minds of the hiring manager and kind of Fortunately, I think we're quite good at that. But something I try and install is kind of look at other technical companies. There's some really great examples of like the second tier of FANGs that have high tech bars and build great cultures and awareness of security within them. And some examples of them are Slack, Block, Robinhood, Databricks, Grammarly, to name a few there. And they have really impressive security teams. They have usually good founders, good CISOs, and build a really solid culture of cybersecurity. So we kind of pluck candidates from there. And then if they have the community-driven event, they're part of groups like B-Sides, or they attend B-Sides, Black Hat, DEF CON, OWASP groups, and maybe they're doing talks, podcasts, and then having a bit of an online brand. I think I've done a couple of Careers Village this year, and that's a big thing that I've been trying to push with my community is build an online presence on Twitter and LinkedIn and talk about the things that you're interested in. Because actually hiring managers put a value on that now. We get asked we'd love to have somebody that's part of the cybersecurity community and have talked to B-Sides as part of the requirement these days, which is really kind of cool. I guess the second track is trying to get hiring managers that are maybe hiring for, say, seniors or kind of entry-level folks, and get them to think about hiring slightly unconventionally. So I've got a lot of people to land their first job through maybe security boot camps or Merit College that I'm part of, and getting them like a SOC analyst or a GRC analyst in a well-suited GRC team where they're maybe doing things like documentation and policy. But them landing that first job, they come in with hunger and tenacity and empathy and all these key skills that we need to be successful in security, and they're given an opportunity and they traditionally fly. Another examples I've seen of this is DevOps engineers, infrastructure engineers, and trying to give them an opportunity to move into cloud and DevSecOps. There are some of the examples that I've seen and the philosophy that I try and install in some of the hiring managers that I do work with. To throw it back to you, you've worked at large companies. You're now on this incredible journey with Conductor One, building a variance of talent. What's your hiring philosophy, Alex?
Oh, you're hitting me with it. Well, there's a few things you said there that resonate really strong with me, and one of those is just this idea of, people just doing amazing things. Fundamentally, hiring is taking a bet on someone. It really is, I think, at the end of the day, and particularly when you're at a startup, I think the challenge is you may not have the cash to, pay as much as some of the bigger companies. And how do you attract that talent? So a lot of times as a startup, you're taking, big bets on people. You're trying to identify talent that might not be as identifiable for like the FANG recruiters, for example. And so I would say maybe my philosophy snap into maybe three buckets. One is I look for signs of excellence. And those can be kind of a little bit of anything, honestly. It can be they played college sports, they blew their quota out of the water, they did something amazing on the engineering side, and just something that kind of shows that, hey, this person understands what excellence looks like, and they were willing to like put in a lot of effort and grit and tenacity to like achieve the excellence in some way, shape, or form in their life or career at some point. Because I think, you kind of have to have that like DNA, that excellence DNA, I think, at the end of the day, to really like continue kind of demonstrating it through your life. That's one thing. I do really look for people who also just demonstrated kind of a consistent track record of growth in their careers or their lives in some way, shape, or form. And that doesn't mean necessarily being in the same job function, for 20 years, going up kind of the ladder in a similar function. Maybe you did a career switch. It doesn't really matter to me at that level, but just kind of seeing some sign that someone is like making progress in their career more broadly. And then I think the third one is I like having the job that someone's going to do at Conductor One be the biggest, most important job that they've ever done. In other words, like, just really giving someone like, if someone's going to come to Conductor One and do literally what they were exactly doing in the last 3 years with no extra expansion or no net new opportunity or no white space, it's hard to understand how that job is going to really challenge them to stretch and do more and be more creative and go the extra mile. And so I really love thinking about how do I create an opportunity at Conductor One to connect this person who's on this high execution path, who's shown signs of excellence and this awesome trajectory, and bring them into Conductor One and give them a lot of white space and see what kind of amazing things they can do with that.
I love that. Yeah. And actually they all kind of, there's a golden thread between all three of them, really, isn't there? So if there's somebody, the second one you gave, if there's somebody that is looking for a kind of career with purpose and have continued to grow their career development, and they come in and they treat Conductor One or whatever company they join as that this is part of that step to whatever their growth strategy, and they're goal orientated and career orientated, that's really, that is exciting. And you mix that with a level of excellence at some point, and having high standards and accountability, ultimately, I think is really, really important. So yeah, I think that's a great philosophy for hiring successfully.
Yeah, it totally makes sense, Tom. I appreciate that. Shifting gears a little bit, something you mentioned in your intro is that you help companies make that first security hire. And what's so interesting to me about that is a couple things. One is, first of all, hiring for security is really hard. The second thing is, anytime as a founder in an early stage company, you're doing something for the first time, I like to think about that in terms of it's like a non-repeat game. It's like raising money or making your first hire, something like that. You're doing it the first time. You're never going to be good at it the first time. Maybe some people are like excellent because they're lucky or they just have a good intuition, but it can be a lot easier to kind of mess something up, the first time you're doing it. And if you're only going to do it once, which definitionally is the first security hire, I can imagine that being really hard to stick the landing on. I'm really kind of curious from your perspective, like, what are the typical gotchas that you advise people on as it relates to making that first security hire? And are there a set of maybe common mistakes that folks make in early stage companies making that first security hire?
Yeah, for sure. And like, to start that conversation, like, you have to go in with a level of like understanding and empathy. And fortunately, something I've got really good at now is doing typically with a founder or a CTO of seed, Series A, Series B, where they're making a first security hire. If it gets to Series C and D, there's usually a question mark of, why is security not part of this company at this point? And sometimes it makes sense as to why not. But if a company's at Series D and they don't have a security program, I usually think there's going to be a bit of a fight with what that looks like, or kind of just some alarm bells usually go off of why now, ultimately. But I'm really excited to work with Series A companies and Series B that are maybe making that head of security. So the first call is typically, as I say, with founder or CTO. And to use the analogy you gave earlier, that you don't know what you don't know. And so the first conversation before we even think about hiring is good questions to ask. Is like Travis McPeak, that we both know, his question to founders is, what keeps you up at night from a security standpoint? And it's such a great question to ask, because it gets them thinking about kind of how security plays into their headache. And typically, if they're Series A and they're thinking about this is a great problem to have. So the first conversation I'm having is that. And usually I'll bring in a security advisor in with me, somebody that's a head of security or experienced CISO, to come and iterate with me around kind of what this profile looks like. And so we'll run through what keeps them up at night, how do they think about security right now, maybe what they've achieved, because some of these companies may have achieved a GRC standard, or like SOC 2, ISO, or maybe they've brought on a tool like a Vanta or something similar. So we start there, and then by the end of that call, we understand where their kind of the low-hanging fruits is, like what's the things we can make impact. If it's a software platform, then maybe SDLC is a good place to start, and bug bounty. But basically, by the end of the call, we'll understand what their needs look like for the next 3, 6, 9 months, and then plug a play of security into there. And then we start to work through on what that profile would look like. Typical thing that I do see, and we're probably not the best company to help with at this stage, is where we do that kickoff call, and really, they're not looking for a security person to come and help build out AppSec, CloudSec, IR detection. They really just need a salesperson to help with kind of onboarding large customers, right? Enterprise customers. And so they need somebody that can help with sales enablement to market programs like SOC 2. Maybe it's a discipline in healthcare and it's HIPAA, or and high trust or FedRAMP in the federal space. And actually, they don't really need a head of security. They need somebody that can work with the board to bring in sales. And that really isn't the right security person, in my opinion, long term. It can help with sales immediately and maybe move the ground on getting kind of sales enablement like SOC 2. But longer term, I don't think is the right hire to take them through Series C, D, and IPO.
Yeah, that's really interesting. One thing I really like about your approach, it sounds like, is that it's very, well, obviously consultative, but also it almost sounds like you kind of map out what the security roadmap should look like for them, which I'm guessing a lot of people, when you're early company, you're just heads down grinding. You're probably not even thinking that far along in terms of security. You might be like really stressed out about a few things, but haven't maybe articulated and wrote it down. So it's kind of cool that you actually come in and help people kind of think about those, what are the big strategic security problems over the next year, and actually map that to the candidate. Are there a set of, well, and the other thing that I think was really interesting about what you said is, it sounds like some people are actually looking for like a field CISO.
That's exactly what it is. And actually, it's the wrong type of hire. And sorry, the other one is that a Series A company wants a CISO, but actually that's what you go in with the conversation, and you speak to the founders, and really they need like an application security lead that has enough experience and general security awareness that they can support on CloudSec and IR and maybe a bit of GRC, because a CISO is going to might not be technical enough, because they've not been in the weeds for years, if ever. Maybe they grew through the GRC route. And we're going to be paying far too much for said person. And they're going to be bored out of their tree with kind of having one hire in the first 12 months. So there's a lot that goes back and forth with these founders. And usually by the end of the call, we've down-leveled the role, made them more technical. And it makes my life easier, because if we get the CISO to the end, I've seen companies that have taken on an experienced CISO at Series A, and they don't last 6 months because, like I say, they're not technical enough to help in the weeds, and they're bored. Like they maybe at Series E or kind of during the IPO process, they need a CISO, but not at Series A and B.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I also imagine that the focus, particularly if you've already been a CISO or an executive, is you're going to think about building a team, right? And building the functions and functional leads. And so your head is almost just at a different level, to your point, than like much more in the weeds. I'm really kind of curious on that in the weeds comment, because I would imagine a lot of companies just, depending on the company, if it's a B2B SaaS or B2C or financial service, modern financial services, whatever the case might be, might have slightly different needs. Like you mentioned AppSec, you mentioned compliance and GRC. Do you find that companies, well, and then to expand on that, the challenge at a startup obviously is everyone wears a lot of hats. So like your role is typically way broader, right? So you kind of got to be a little bit of a jack of all trades, but hopefully also maybe a master of one or two. Do you find that to be the case for that first security hire? Or are you trying to identify one or two domains that you're really going to find some specialization in, but people still have to be broad? Or is it really about just kind of sticking the landing on depth, or is it just about finding the generalists? Like, how do you kind of think about that?
And it's a really great question. And sometimes the answer is it depends, but we've done probably about 35 of these placements in the last 12 to 18 months. So we're pretty good at it. And the consistent trend is a security generalist is always going to be the hire that we kind of recommend. But where we make most of our hires is somebody that is maybe in the application security org, has grown as an engineer, senior, maybe staff, and has led either been a technical lead on infra, sec, or AppSec, and has grown into kind of like a technical manager and maybe had a couple of reports. That is the golden kind of hire for us, or what we look for, because they can come in and help out on one of the pillars, which is AppSec, and then maybe they've got enough experience around cloud security that they can start to build the framework. But then as they're going through the interview process, I'm always saying to candidates and the client, make sure that you've got the buy-in to build a roadmap. Because if it's just going to be you on AppSec for 18, 24 months, it might be a necessary evil, but you're not really moving the roadmap forward that much. So that will go on to like where you start hiring as that head of security kind of underneath you. But yeah, to answer your question, Alex, like I think that an AppSec SME that's grown into maybe management is usually a great place to hire for that first head of security.
I wanted to go back to something that you talked a little bit about earlier, which is kind of helping companies also blow out their security practices and hire a bench in a team. And I'm just triangulating that with how hard it is to find security talent today. And I think security engineers is one of the biggest hires people are trying to make for today. I gotta imagine there's just not a lot. The demand maybe outstrips the talent. How do you think about career changes into that function? Are you ever trying to source folks from maybe like non-traditional backgrounds and help them get into security? Like there's got to be some sort of on-ramp into that function and into the security practice to help kind of really fulfill that demand, even if it's people maybe without the prerequisite like quote unquote skills on paper to do the job. Or how do you just kind of think about like helping companies, attract talent that maybe is like a little bit non-traditional?
And it's an important conversation to be had. Our kind of mission statement is to bridge the cybersecurity talent gap, right? And that's a lovely mission statement. But when there's only a finite pool of talent, you have to hire unconventionally. There's kind of, I mentioned earlier in this conversation, but if everybody's hiring from FANGs with universities from say Berkeley or top kind of universities across the United States, there's only a finite amount of pool and kind of graduates coming through. So you have to think kind of where's the resource coming from? There's some great initiatives out there. I know the Databricks team really well. They've hired a penetration tester that's killing it. That I think it's like 20 years of age. They hired through the bug bounty program, right? That's out in France and just kept on consistently bringing vulnerabilities through the bug bounty program. Then they hired them, right? So that's a cool example. There's other examples, like I'm fortunate to work with a community college over in Oakland that helps people from unconventional backgrounds break into cybersecurity. They do a 2-year boot camp, and then they have like forensic experience, SOC experience, and then some GRC. And they come with real world experience. Like they've worked at places like kind of Lowe's and Walmart and restaurants and been self-employed. And so they come with like a good understanding of like hard work, but also like empathy and understanding and actually kind of just intrigue and interest. And so you put them into an entry-level role, and honestly, you just see them fly because they're given an opportunity that usually you have to have a 3 to 5 year degree to break into. So they very much welcome the opportunity, and they just work really hard and smart to achieve their goals. Actually, kind of maybe some of the excellence isn't there, but you're hiring kind of, and that's not entirely true. I'm sure there is excellence in some ways, but your hiring philosophy that you mentioned earlier, points 2 and 3, they have in bags. And I think that is my mantra for hiring kind of unconventionally. And then, yeah, like I always ask hiring managers if they've had a position open for a while, and let's say it's cloud security, have you looked internally? Have you looked at DevOps? Have you looked in your infrastructure team? Kind of, because that's a great place to start. I can help you, but if it's not like a staff level role and maybe it's a security engineer, have you thought about giving somebody the opportunity that's maybe been with the company a year, 18 months to train them up? Because that's a huge skill that they could pick up, but also you get that kind of employee loyalty and kind of they understand the landscape of what the business looks like.
That resonates with me a lot. I love the comment also about internal hires. I know at my previous company, some of the most talented product managers, I worked a lot in product management, some of the most talented product managers that I worked with came from support, came from product marketing, came from, I think, customer success. So just kind of like all across the board, it's just back to that conversation before about identifying talent. At the end of the day, like people who are hungry, who want to do the job, who show that signs of excellence and greatness and potential. And I love that story too about hiring the bug bounty person. I would argue that is like super signs of excellence, actually, that they were finding all these bugs over the and we're like submitting them to the bug bounty program, and That's great. That's such a great story, and what a win. And it sounds like that person is tremendously talented.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's just really novel. I don't see those many examples of that happening, but I just love the person that did hire that individual kind of was open-minded enough to hire, I don't know, a 19-year-old person out of a location where they don't have an office. I mean, they're a remote first business, but gave them opportunity and kind of, I believe they're flying. So that's good to hear.
That's awesome. What's a great bet to make on someone? Well, Tom, I appreciate you taking the time to chat with me today about all things security hiring and making that first hire. It's a really great conversation. I know a lot of founders and early stage startups listen to our podcast. So I think people are going to find this really, really, really helpful. And shout out to Code Red Partners if you need help with hiring, whether that's security hires or just building out your security function. Definitely give Tom a shout.
Thanks for having me on, Alex. This was a ton of fun. Appreciate it. Thanks, Tom. See you.
Thanks for tuning in. This episode of All Aboard is brought to you by the team at Conductor One. We'd love to hear your feedback. Send us a message at allaboard@conductorone.com. Till next time.